GBNews. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GBNews. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Tonight, the College of Policing say that imprisonment of criminals results in more reoffending than if criminals serve their sentence in the community. What do you think? Should we be sending less people to prison? Or quite frankly, should prison be a little bit harsher? And then actually people might think twice about going back. You tell me. Also, bleeding control cabinets, aka stab cupboards, have been added to the streets of Britain. Is this good, decent common sense? Or are we basically accepting defeat when it comes to the war against knife crime? And also, it's been announced today that train fares in England will rise next year by just shy of 5%. In Scotland, it's almost 9%. What do you make to that? I wouldn't mind if you could even get a seat every time you get on a train. Have you managed to on your last few train journeys? You tell me. And of course, the Home Office have now U-turned on their salary thresholds for migrants to be able to bring their loved ones. Do they not think these policies through before they issue them in the first place? Also here in the UK, we've got a declining birth rate. Does that bother you? And it's nearly Christmas, yes. Are you going to be charging your relatives for their Christmas dinner round at yours? We're going to get stuck into all of that, but before we do, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 6. Well, as we've been hearing, millions of train passengers are facing a hike in their fares of nearly 5%. The Department of Transport has confirmed that regulated rail fares in England will rise from the 3rd of March. The increase is based on inflation, but it's being capped at 4.9%. Passengers say it's just more financial pressure.
Already the trains are striking on that. We pay enough and we don't get the service that they should be delivering.
I mean, it makes sense because everything's going up, but, you know, it's not good news.
I think they've got to get their act together first before they start thinking about putting prices up yet again.
I'm not looking forward to it because we do use public transport quite a lot and trains, so it's going to be a bit rough on the bank account, but, you know, I guess we'll just have to live with it. It's how things are going nowadays.
Well, the Prime Minister says that the hike would have been higher if the government hadn't intervened.
The increase that we're seeing now, I think, strikes the right balance between raising the money that the railway ultimately needs to run, particularly in a post-COVID environment, but also minimising the burden on hard-working rail passengers. And at longer term, the best thing we can do is reform outdated working practices on the railroad so we can make them more financially sustainable, and we're committed to doing that too.
Well, the news comes as rail passengers are facing yet more travel disruption as they try to get away for Christmas. Trains are running out of London, but there have been cancellations, with Paddington Station closing for 4 days from Christmas Eve on Sunday, and Heathrow's also set to be exceptionally busy. The airport's expecting more than 250,000 passengers over the coming days, And motorists are being affected by the delays as well, with the Port of Dover saying it takes around 90 minutes at the moment to process cars with pre-booked tickets. Travel editor Lisa Minot told GB News that travellers need to be patient.
Today is predicted to be the busiest day, and that's because you've got normal commuters, normal truck drivers on the roads. At the same time, you've got all of those people that are starting to head away for Christmas. So today is going to be the big point. They're also talking about a lunch crunch. It's going to be the point where actually lunchtime is going to be the busiest day on all of the next 3 days. So between 12 and 2, that's you really don't want to find yourself on any of the roads in the UK network.
Well, the UK has said that it's doing all it can to get more aid into Gaza. That's with the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, describing the latest United Nations vote as good news. The UN Security Council has passed a resolution to increase humanitarian support for civilians, but it stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. The US and Russia have both abstained from that vote. It comes as the World Food Programme says Gaza is at risk of famine within just 6 months if the conflict between Israel and Hamas doesn't end. A criminal investigation has been launched into the alleged abduction of Alex Batty. The teenager, who'd been missing for 6 years, returned to the UK last week after being found in France. He disappeared when he was just 11 years old, after his mother, who wasn't his legal guardian, had taken him on a pre-arranged trip to Spain. Greater Manchester Police is investigating the case after interviewing the 17-year-old. A British student who built a drone for the so-called Islamic State terror group has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years. 27-year-old Mohammed Al-Barid used a 3D printer at his home in Coventry to make the device, designed to carry a bomb or chemical weapons. On sentencing, the judge described him as a manipulative individual and a committed extremist who built the drone to cause horror and destruction. The UK economy is at risk of falling into another recession after revised figures showed it performed worse than expected in the third quarter. Rather than flatlining, the economy contracted by 0.1%. And if the economy shrinks for a second consecutive quarter, it will enter what's known as a technical recession. Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, blames the government.
This is yet more evidence of failure from Rishi Sunak. He's already failed to cut waiting lists, he's failed to stop the boats, and now it's been confirmed that he's failed to grow the economy too. And actually, this is just the latest in 13 years of economic failure from the Conservatives, which has left people across Britain worse off. I'm very worried about the economic forecasts for this country. If you look at the growth forecasts issued by the Office of Budget Responsibility earlier in the autumn, they've cut the growth forecast for the next 3 years.
This is GB News across the UK. We're on your TV, in your car, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now, though, more from Michelle.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside, we've got my panel, the trade unionist and broadcaster Paul Embry and the Conservative peer and the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Moylan. Good evening to both of you. It's my last show this year, so what a treat to have you both. I'm very much in the Christmas spirit. Are you
Flattery
guys?
will get you everywhere.
I know. I'm into it. I'm properly into the Christmas spirit. And you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three. It is about you guys at home as well. It's your last chance as well to give your Christmas tree. It's 15 seconds of fame. So if you're sitting there, you've been sending me your Christmas trees in. I do try and show a couple if I can before the end of the programme. So get a nice picture of it. Get it in. Tell me your name and where you're from. I'll try and pop it up on the screen before the end of the programme. But you can get in touch with me all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you email me, or indeed you can tweet me at GBNews. Got a packed show coming up for you. I want to talk about quite a lot of stuff today. Crime, law and order, attitudes to crime as well. I also want to talk to you about birth rates, immigration, lots of stuff, and some nice Christmassy festivities as well before I do say farewell for the rest of the year. But for now, a new report from the College of Policing has basically found that imprisonment apparently resulted in increased reoffending when you compare this to when people were out in the community serving their sentence. I find this quite interesting because some people, Daniel, are saying it's basically evidence of the fact that prison doesn't really work. Do you think that's the case?
No, it doesn't work, does it? By what measure does it actually work? There's a small number of people who are violent and dangerous who may need to be locked up for the whole of their life. And we have whole life sentences for people like that, or very, very long sentences to keep them locked up while they're still dangerous. But that's a relatively small number of people. When you look at the rest of the prison population, most of them actually learn very little in prison, apart from how to commit crimes more cleverly. They're not rehabilitated in any sense. Of course, they're punished, but through loss of liberty, and it's right that they should be punished. But there are other ways of punishing people, and not just through imprisonment. And we've also got the problem.
What?
We've also got the problem.
But how else would you punish them then?
Well, people are, there are community sentences and other ways of restricting people's ability. There are tagging, all sorts of other ways in which your life can be made sort of pretty constrained and miserable without being in prison. And we've also got the problem that we are locking so many people up, we can't accommodate them. So we have to end up building more prisons, which continue to be pretty badly run. I mean, all right, they're not that bad, as bad as they used to be. Things have improved in the management of prisons. But nonetheless, they're hardly ideal showcases for how something should be managed. And we can't afford it. We've got to face up to the fact we can't afford it.
Well, I mean, prison works in the sense that when people are there, they can't commit crimes.
Well, they do.
They can't commit crimes on the outside.
Crimes against
that afflict their communities and affect people in the outside world. So, in that sense, those people are incarcerated, and that means that the average citizen is protected from them for the period that they're inside. So in that sense, it does work.
So you protect someone from, say, an accountant who's been locked up for fraud. Quite rightly, fraud's a very serious offence. So somebody's been locked up for fraud. You're not protecting the public from him. He's not going to get another job as an accountant.
Well, you're protecting people who may be victims of further fraud if that person were to.
Yeah, well, he's not likely to get another job, is he, as an accountant?
You don't know that. But what is wrong, Dan? But what is wrong? I mean, I don't want to sound like a sort of hang 'em flog 'em sort of person because that's not what I am. But what is wrong with the principle of punishment? Now, it shouldn't just be about, well, prison should rehabilitate people. We should only send people to prison if it's a serious crime, if the general public needs protection. If the public aren't going to be protected for the period that the person's incarcerated, then they shouldn't be in prison. But actually, the very principle of denying somebody their freedom because they have committed a serious crime, which has got a victim or victims, is in itself not an ignoble proposition.
I'm absolutely with you on punishment, but I just say the whole idea of locking people up in prison as a punishment is a relatively modern idea. It barely goes back 200 years, and it was invented by liberals who thought that if you locked them up in prison, they would be improved in their character and they would come out better people. Now, that turned out to be a pretty false impression. What we know is they generally come out as worse-behaved people with more mental health problems, less capable of managing themselves in the outside world. And it isn't actually working like that. It's an experiment that hasn't worked.
But isn't the problem that by the time we send people to prison in this country, the law, and I think the data shows this, the law intervenes so late that actually by the time people eventually get sent to prison, invariably they're habitual criminals. They are career criminals who have become so kind of enmeshed in that way of living that in the end they get sent to prison. If the law intervened sooner, then that wouldn't be an issue.
One of my viewers, John, says, Michelle, prisons are not working because they're like hotels. Ultimately, you go to prison for punishment, and it should reflect that. It is not a rehabilitation centre, but a punishment centre. And the harder it is, essentially, the more it will encourage you not to go back. I agree with him.
Yeah, well, we used to have, up until the 1950s, we used to have prisons that ran as punishment centres. So you'd be put on a treadmill, or you'd be set to doing debilitating work like, what was it? What do they have to do? What was the name of it?
Sewing mailbags.
Yeah, mailbags.
Sewing mailbags, or threading cord with their fingernails till the fingernails were gone, and things like that. And we used to do that quite deliberately. That's why the middle classes. If the middle classes were sent to prison, it was virtually a death sentence practically in the 19th century, because it's very hard for them to survive it. And it was designed to really punish the working classes by making life really cruel.
I'm a great believer
we could go back to that. Yeah.
I think it'd be great. You've got a great workforce available to you in prisons. Obviously, you'd have to pay for their labour, but why not? What's wrong with using that prison workforce to perform activities that will be beneficial to the wider outside economy? Great idea.
I don't, in principle, object to that if they're if they are properly remunerated. But you can't have slave labour.
No, I would pay them. I would pay them something.
Pay them something.
I wouldn't pay them the
market rate.
No, I wouldn't pay them the market rate because they're getting their board and lodgings and all the rest of it paid for by the state. So I'll deduct that.
It's important that business isn't able to exploit cheap labour inside prisons.
No,
I mean,
businesses would pay the going rate to the prisons, then the prisons would make a deduction for the living costs and all the rest of it, and then pay the rest to the worker. Great idea.
I'm not opposed to that at all. If we could get people working productively in a way that helps them, integrate back into society, may give them better job prospects when they come out into the big wide world again. I'm not opposed to that at all. But as long as they get decent treatment and decent rights as other workers would get.
What do you guys? Oh, he wants them to have. He'll want unions next. He'll want prisoner unions. That's what I can see it.
Anyone who sells his labour power is entitled to be in a union.
Oh, there you go. Right. Tell me what you guys think to that at home. I want to ask you as well about these things that some people are calling stab cupboards, basically. They're going to be starting to pop up in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And some people are saying, I can bring one up on the screen, they're basically called like emergency bleeding kits. So the thinking is apparently it takes about 5 minutes to die out of bleeding if you get stabbed. It can often take much longer for an ambulance to come and help you. This is one of them, look, on the screen now. They essentially look a little bit like, if you're listening, not watching, they essentially look like these, the defib units. Do you think these are a good idea?
Yeah.
Do you? Do you think...
Yeah, just like I think defib units are a good idea. I'm really pleased to know that there are defibrillator units around the place where I work, around the Houses of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. I'd like to know if I had a heart attack, somebody who was with minimal training could actually help me survive that. I think that's good. And same if I was stabbed. I don't expect to be stabbed. I'm probably more likely to have a heart attack, especially with Paul going on. I hope you've got one here.
That's why I'm cranking it up the whole time.
I've got them all, yes.
I'm probably more likely to have a heart attack than be stabbed in the House of Lords, I have to admit. But nonetheless, I think, and it might not always be stabbing, it could be some other genuine accident that leads So in principle, it's a good thing. But the question you're asking is slightly different, which is, well, I think you're asking is, are we too accepting of stabbing as part of a way of life? And I think we are probably too accepting of it, and we ought to be better at stamping out knife crime.
I've got two concerns. I mean, so in principle, of course, I agree. Anything that helps save anybody's life, of course, I salute and I support. But there is a part of me that worries a little bit because, firstly, are we just accepting now, that kids are just going to wander around carrying knives and therefore we're going to put these up on all the street corners, point one and point two? Are we almost letting the emergency services off the hook? Because you have category 1 response times that you're supposed to be hitting, but don't worry about it. Someone's been stabbed over there, but hey, they've got that kit on the street corner, so we can just chill out and go to a different call. Are we going to get that kind of slippage in response time?
Potentially, and that's a danger. And I think we are becoming inured to it, actually. The fact that it's become a feature now of our lives, of our communities, that these stabbings are taking place, that we don't really bat an eyelid when we hear that the next youngster, 13 years of age, 14 years of age, has been stabbed in London. We kind of wake up and hear it on the news and think, well, there's another one kind of thing. And 20 or 30 years ago, I think there would have been very serious public and political debates whenever, because it was so rare or rarer, if a young kid was stabbed in any city, we would hear about it. I remember the terrible murder of Damilola Taylor, young 9-year-old boy,
on the stairwell,
the son of African immigrants, I believe, in Peckham in South London, 9 years of age, stabbed on a stairwell. And at the time, this was in the year 2000, I checked it before we came on air, and I remember at the time there was a very intense, very passionate public debate asking not just about the incident itself and the details of the incident, but how on earth this could happen, how on earth a 9-year-old boy could be stabbed by 2 other youngsters. Nowadays, we tend not to bat an eyelid at it, and I find that really disturbing.
Well, there was that case this week, actually, where a little 4-year-old came out had been stabbed as well. I mean, I've got to say, that one, absolutely. I know what you're saying, people are becoming immune to stabbings, but that one really did stop me in my tracks. And also, people's attitude to crimes as well, I think, are quite interesting. You mentioned Peckham. Also in Peckham today, I don't know if you saw this, Banksy, the artist, the street artist Banksy, he created this piece of artwork. I'll get it up on the screen if I can and show you. It was basically like a stop sign, and it had some drones built into it. I've put it up on the screen. Anyway, Banksy apparently went online and said, yeah, this is bona fide, it's my piece of work. About an hour or so later, some fella took it upon himself in broad daylight, in front of everyone, he's on the screen. He goes over to it, props himself up on this bike, tries whipping it off with his bare hands unsuccessfully, wanders off, returns a few minutes later with some bolt cutters, cuts it off in front of everybody, leaves the bolt cutters on the side, wanders off with his artwork. And it makes me think, people don't seem to have a fear of other people intervening.
But they have a lack of fear over authority intervening, and other people certainly, but most people who are doing this stuff, and we see it with the epidemic that we're seeing now in our shops, with, you know, people brazenly shoplifting in a way that, you know, didn't happen a few years ago. They know the chances of being apprehended, and even if they are apprehended, then being prosecuted and ending up in court, are minimal. So
would you intervene, Lord Moylan, if you saw a crime going on in front of you?
I think very hard about doing so.
Why? For fear of being harmed?
Somebody might wallop me or stab me.
Well,
and I'm not sure I'm up for that.
I do find this topic interesting. Would you intervene if you saw a crime? One that shocked me the other day, you might be familiar with it. A fella got sent to prison, or he got sentenced at least. He raped someone on the underground train, the tube, in broad daylight, and nobody intervened. I mean, what is this world coming to where a man can rape a woman on a train and people look on? And you tell me.
There was an appalling attack on a Jewish woman a couple of weeks ago in Stamford Hill, which was captured on CCTV, and you saw vehicles driving past as it was going on and people, pedestrians walking past as it was going on. Nobody stopped to intervene when a woman was being attacked, which I thought was appalling.
Did it always used to be like this, guys? You tell me at home. Are things getting worse, or do we just have social media and a lot more awareness and knowledge of what goes on? You tell me. After the break, I want to talk to you about train fares. They're going up next year. Nearly 5% in England, nearly 9% in Scotland. Is that a good deal or not? You tell me.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Trade unionist and broadcaster Paul Embry alongside me, as is a Conservative peer and the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Moylan. Let me know your thoughts about that whole prison situation, and in particular as well whether or not you would intervene if you saw a crime unfolding under your very eyes, or would you just be worried? And think, what would the consequences be to me? Or would you just think, yeah, I'm not getting involved in that, thank you very much, and off you turn? Tell me your thoughts on that. But for now, the Department for Transport has announced that rail fares, they're going to increase by nearly 5% in England and, next year. I was just about to say next year, and it felt like such a long time away, but actually, it's not that far away next year at all, is it? In Scotland, prices there could rise by nearly 9%. What do you think to this? Is this good value for money? Is it too high, too low? What's your thoughts?
What I'm going to say is not going to be popular.
Why?
Because
there's nothing new there, Daniel.
Trains are expensive to run.
And this is your background, by the way, transport.
And I do know a bit about trains.
Yeah.
Trains are expensive to run, and they need to be paid for. Part of it is because the staff salaries are linked to inflation, so they go up with inflation, costs go up with inflation. So you need to expect an inflationary rise. This is higher than inflation has been over the last year. I know inflation's come down this month, but this is higher. This is not as high as inflation has been. So it's a below inflation increase. The costs go up. Somebody has to pay for it. Now, about 5% of journeys in this country are made by rail. The rest are made by other modes, mostly car. So the question is always going to be, who pays for it? The taxpayer or the fare payer? And I think it's fair that the fare payer should pay their whack. And that's what's happening here. Now, you could say, no, we don't want to do that. We'll put it all on the taxes, and everyone, whether they use the train or not, will make their contribution. That's a political choice if you want to make it, but I don't think that's the choice I would make.
Do you use trains at home? And if you do, tell me what your experience is, because I used to use trains a lot and I got fed up with last-minute cancellations. My family came and see me the other day on a 7 o'clock train. You get to the train station, the train's cancelled. So there you stood at 6:45 in the morning. Your train's gone now. You find yourself diverting via Doncaster on some random connection. You miss the connection there. You're sprinting through a train station. No, thanks. I'd rather drive. Where are you on it?
Well, let's get to the point. The railway should be taken back into public ownership.
Oh, what time is it? It's 25 past 6, everyone. We got there in the end. There you go. People play poll bingo, you know. Do you know that?
Yeah, but
my viewers.
But I think you'll find a lot of your viewers will agree with me on this. Privatisation, Daniel, has been a... Let me finish.
Let him do his
Daniel, hold on. Privatisation has been a complete scam. Let's be honest about it. We've got foreign-owned companies who now own our railways, repatriate the profits, and since privatisation, we've seen the service get dirtier, more expensive, more unreliable. We are still subsidising it as taxpayers to the tune of millions and millions of pounds a year. And there is, well, indeed, and there is, for me, a compelling argument to say that there should be renationalisation. We pay the highest rail fares in this country in Europe.
Good.
We have... Good?
Yeah, it is good.
You think it's a good thing?
It is good because
how on earth can it be good that we have the highest fares in Europe?
It's fairer that the people who use the service are paying for it than the general taxpayer. And nationalising it would... Nearly all of it's nationalised already. It's purely the train operating companies that are not nationalised.
Quite a big part of it.
The track, the rails, all the costs that go into maintenance of the rails and tracks, all the costs that go into building new stuff, electrifying stuff, putting in new bridges, all that's nationalised, all that's on the taxpayer already. It's just the train operating companies that are not nationalised. You could nationalise them tomorrow, it wouldn't be any skin off my nose. You'd have to pay them out and buy the equity.
Well, you wouldn't have to, actually.
You would, actually. Well, you would. I think you'll find the human rights...
Nationalise without compensation. I don't support nationalisation without compensation, but, you know, there's an argument for it.
There is, but you wouldn't be allowed to do it while you're still in the European Convention on Human Rights.
The railway system, Daniel, is an integral part of the functioning of our country.
You would still have...
Don't talk over each other.
It's an integral part of the functioning of our country, Daniel. Why should privateers own such a fundamentally integral part of our country and make huge profits profits out
one
of it.
at a time. Right, you go on.
No, I've done now. You still
Right,
have the
okay,
same
well, you
profits
go
and the
then.
same
I'm saying a railway system is a fundamentally important part of the
Stop talking over him.
of the functioning of our country, like water, for example, like a national health service. For me, the idea, when so many people rely on it to make the country function, to get to work, to see relatives and so on, that system, which we built up and was once upon a time publicly owned, should have been sold off to privateers who now make an enormous amount of money out of it and have not actually improved the system at all. I think that's incontestable.
The system hasn't been
They have
sold
not improved the system at all. I don't see how you can say we should maintain the status quo. When fares, for example, under the Tories, I have to say, Daniel, fares have risen twice as quickly as wages. And when you compare the railway system that we have to places like France and places like China, I mean, it is falling apart. We've closed a huge number of stations, and people in, for example, coastal communities are neglected.
Which stations have we closed?
Well, I mean,
since Beeching. I mean, which stations have recently been closed for the last 10 years or something?
Since Beeching,
Which stations have been closed?
Hold on.
Let him answer then. Go on, give us a
Huge
station.
number of stations closed.
Since Beeching, obviously a huge number of
That was
closed.
70 years
But even in more recent years, we've seen branch lines and some stations closed as well. Well, I think we have actually.
Have we?
But the point is
numbers, you said.
But the point, well, over the years we have, yeah. But the point, it's not. It's absolutely true. And the point is, we are way behind when it comes to our infrastructure generally. But when it comes to our public transport system, and, you know, we're trying to get people off the road because we're saying, you know, it pollutes the atmosphere, and in London you've got the ULEZ charge and the congestion charge and things like that. Well, OK, bring in those charges only once you've got a decent functioning, cheap, reliable, integrated public transport system, which includes a publicly owned railway system. We don't have that at the moment, and I think it's a mark of shame on this country.
Despite everything that's been done, only 5% of journeys are made by rail.
It's so expensive, though, Daniel.
That's the reason.
People can't afford it.
More.
People can't afford it. If you want to go to Birmingham or to Liverpool and you decide the day before to do it, it could cost you hundreds of pounds.
There are lots and lots of cheap fares, and there are several routes to Birmingham, and they're in competition. And you can go from Marylebone on the Chiltern line, you can go from Euston on the main line, and they're in competition, and there are lots of cheap fares if you want to get to Birmingham. I come from Birmingham, I go back there quite often.
If you book about 3 years in advance, you could possibly get a fairly cheap one. But anyone who wants to go in a couple of days' time is going to pay through.
Yeah, but one of the reasons that fewer people are using the train, it's not always because of the money. It's because so many strikes now have made it so almost impossible to factor in, right, do you know what, I'm going on this date and I'm going on the train, because so many journeys are disrupted because of strike action, that so many people now have decided, you know what, I'm just going to make alternate arrangements. Actually, I would say that it's been counterproductive, these constant, relentless, incessant strikes. They've just taken customers away.
Michelle, I would say, I think if you attribute the current state of the railways and the state that it's been in for years now simply to the recent wave of strike action, which, of course, causes disruption, I don't deny that. But trust me, the state of the railways is attributable to factors far, far wider than
No, the railways are actually
action.
carrying twice as many people now as they were at the time of privatisation. Leaving COVID aside, it's dropped, of course, for COVID, but up until the point of COVID, 1.8 billion journeys a year regularly. That was a statistic that went on year after year. Was roughly double the number that were travelling. To say that they've failed, to say that the trains are all dirty when so many of them are new, to say that huge numbers of stations have been closed, to say that you have to pay hundreds of pounds to go to Birmingham to buy if you buy a ticket 2 days in advance is just all made up, Paul.
It's not all made up, Daniel.
I'm sorry, just saying it doesn't make it true.
It's not made up. If you, for example, wanted to come in peak time, in peak hours, from Norwich to London, in peak time, there and back, you're paying about you're paying over £100, and I know that from personal experience. So the idea that, you know, all of these fares are cheap is simply not true.
Peak fares should be high.
Over £100 to go from Norwich to London.
Peak fares should be high because you're trying to deter people from travelling in the peak. And you're trying to encourage them.
Why would you want to deter people?
Because the train is full.
Well, put more trains in, invest in the system and provide more trains so that more people will be able to go and make the fares cheaper. But the private companies won't do that because the only thing they're interested in is the bottom line and the profit motive. That's why it should be nationalised.
Some of my viewers are getting in touch reminiscing about the days of British Rail. and I don't really seem to have many positive stories coming through from the days where, so for example, Leslie says, my husband used to work for British Rail when it was state-owned and when it was privatised. She describes the work experience and says his work experience was absolutely categorically so much better, her words, when it was privatised than it was previously. Sarah says British Rail, when it was run by the state, was absolutely dreadful. So I don't really feel that people are kind of reminiscing with the same kind of rosy, happy memories, perhaps, that you might have. I'll throw it open to you guys, though. Do you agree with Paul? Because I can see a few people coming in saying that they do, and that you do think that nationalisation is the answer. Do you trust this government to run a huge transport infrastructure on a daily, ongoing, hourly basis? What makes you think that they all of a sudden would excel in that department? Get in touch.
Well, they do already. They're the ones running the tracks and the railways.
On that, yes, but many people would argue that they're not having a great experience of things as they even stand at the moment. Let me know your thoughts. You can have the final say on this one, because I'm sure we could continue this conversation. But for now, I will move on to a different conversation. So much I want to talk to you about. I want to ask you about the salary threshold for bringing in your loved ones. Have you seen that the government has U-turned on that one? Also, as well, declining birth rate in this country. Does that matter to you? Do you think it's important or not? I'll see you in 2.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Paul Embry and Lord Moylan still remain alongside me. Talking about the pay rises, the fare increases on the trains, John says it's totally unfair. All of these trains should be renationalised. The fare system is so complicated. And you say you are an advocate of nationalising all the key industries, water, utilities, etc., etc. Cool, blimey. It won't surprise you to know that Paul is chuntering along in the back. Yeah, cheers. Yeah, agree. He agrees with you.
Good man.
Kevin says, Michelle, yes, you're right. Prices won't go up for the thousands of people that wouldn't even bother buying a ticket in the first place. Joan says, I completely agree with Paul. Private railways are a disaster and too much of our money ends up abroad, she says. Colin says, we refuse to use the trains now because of the strikes. You say that you feel that train drivers are greedy and overpaid. Cool, blimey. Keep your thoughts coming in. Let's talk then, shall we? You'll be familiar by now with the story about the thresholds when it comes to immigration and visas and all the rest of it, and how much you have to earn in order to bring your loved ones in. Well, the threshold, as you'll know, is currently £18,600. Then it was going to increase to £38,700. There was conversations about people taking legal action against that, basically saying it was cruel and inhumane and disrupted people's right to a family life and all the rest of it. Anyway, long story short, it's now been announced that they're going to change the threshold and cut it back to £29,000. It makes me think, right, don't the government think through their policies before they announce them?
No, not always.
Why? Why?
Because they do it so quickly. That's the trouble, and because there's no real process for thrashing out complicated issues, and they rush out with them too often. But I'd like to say on the that's my view on how government works these days. And it's not just this government, it'll be exactly the same under Starmer, because we have a relatively dysfunctional system and a civil service that is less professional in some ways than it used to be 20 or 30 years ago. But it's not just the civil. I don't primarily blame the civil service for this. It's the number 10 nexus where everything is run by a prime minister with a lot of young spads around him, and they don't think things through properly, and they come out. And I think this is what's happened here. They haven't thought through properly what this means. Could I, on the substance, though, could I make a distinction between people who are here settled and who have their families with them?
Yeah.
And I think there should not be significant barriers to them bringing their spouses to join them.
So you think like new applicants and beyond?
But I think when it comes to somebody coming new to this country for the first time, I think this is fundamentally a distraction. The key question is, how many people are we bringing in who are getting the work visas? Not how many people are coming in as their partners. Because if they weren't coming in for the work visas, the partners wouldn't be following them. And I think that's where the government needs to be focusing, and that's what most people think. And that's really the core point.
Indeed. Paul?
I'm open-minded on the threshold, but I think what this shows is a government that is actually in favour of mass immigration. I mean, they've been promising for 13 years to cut it. They haven't stuck to those promises. I think that has serious implications for democracy when a government goes to the country time and time again at an election and makes it a clear part of its manifesto that we understand your concerns on this, we are going to do it. You had the Brexit referendum as well, where people expected that it would be dealt with, and time again, whatever your view on immigration, if the government keeps reneging on its promises, then I think that has serious ramifications for the whole principle of democratic accountability
but a lot of stuff's
and
happened
democracy
that's
itself.
outside of the control of the government. So, for example, the pandemic came along and then they came up with this policy to pay everyone to sit at home on their backsides. A lot of people thought to themselves, well, why would I sit in London on my backside when I can return home to wherever my home is and stay there and work? A lot of people then didn't return back into the world of work. They quite like where they was before, or they got mental health issues or whatever it was. So now, actually, you do have the situation where you've got labour shortage and you've got people, like millions, I think it's 5.something million now,
What we should
not
be
in
doing,
work.
what we should be doing, though, Michelle, we've got 1.5 million people unemployed in this country. We have got a serious skills shortage and a serious lack of vocational training and knowledge amongst our own people, if we can describe them in that way. The way to address that is to upskill our domestic workforce, to make certain jobs that we think that British people would never want to go into, social care and that kind of thing, make them more attractive by making the wages more attractive. If you have a situation where you deal with it through...
So higher taxes then?
Well, not necessarily high taxes, but, you know, by more attractive wages for particular jobs and upskilling the workforce, and then you can put the domestic workforce, the potential domestic workforce that at the moment isn't working, towards those jobs, rather than this constant reliance on cheap overseas labour, which, you know, may be a sticking plaster in the short term, but isn't going to resolve the problem in the long term. Because one point that people constantly miss is that it's a never-ending treadmill. You know, because people say, well, we need, you know, people coming here to look after our elderly generation, we've got an ageing population and so on. But the point that people miss with that is that the immigrants themselves, who, the vast majority of whom are decent, hard-working people, I have to say, but they will reach old age at some point. And then when they reach old age, we have an even larger number of people who need, you know, social care and reliance on public services. So we then just continue to import more and more people. So it becomes a never-ending treadmill. It's not the way to solve it.
A declining birth rate as well. So a lot of people are getting concerned about this. Women are not having as many children as perhaps other people would like them to have. Are you concerned by that or not?
Yeah, I am. Can I just say, broadly speaking, I agree with nearly everything Paul just said.
Cool, blimey.
Yeah, cool, blimey.
What's the world coming to?
Bank that.
But I do bank that. But as far as the birth rate is concerned, yeah, I mean, I think one of the most notable developments was at the beginning of the 2000s when Gordon Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he set out policies deliberately to make it, to basically to force women to join the workforce. And that has become the norm. And what it set up is a huge cost of childcare for them. It means they don't have always the time, they postpone when they start having families, they have smaller families. There is a second issue, which of course is housing, which the government has failed to deliver on, I'm afraid. And that is you need a decent house if you want to bring up a decent family, or a decent home at least.
You do.
And that is harder and harder for younger couples.
Well, a lot of young women, they have been sold a bit of a pop, actually, because we have all been told you can have everything. You can do whatever you want. You can work, you can travel, you can have your kids and all the rest of it. No one talks, honestly, though, about that ticking time clock called your biological clock. A lot of women get to their 40s, go, right, I've done this now, or now I'll start settling down having kids. And guess what? You find out, actually, it's a lot trickier than people actually let on in the first place. Let me know your thoughts about that. Coming up, guess what? It is my last show of the year, my last show before Christmas as well. You guys have been sending me your Christmas trees. I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about Christmas #1. I want to get into the Christmas spirit, and I want to ask you as well, are you going to charge your relatives to come and join you for Christmas dinner this year?
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes. How awesome was that, everybody? That was Roy Wood performing I Wish It Could Be Christmas every day. Yes, live. Did you see it last night? Farage at large in Birmingham. Well, anyway, look, cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Dewberry Tavern is open for the final time this year. I was going to say I dare lean over and do a cheers. They might fall off and that's not going to end well, is it? But cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
And cheers to you guys at home. The final time. And cheers to Simon Jackson, 46 years old tonight. What a spring chicken. He said when you open the Dewberry Tavern, please can you do me a favour and wish me a happy birthday. He watches us often and he likes the programme. Didn't say too much about you two, though. I'm not sure if you two was up there with his favourites.
I come to expect that.
Yeah, but anyway, there you go. Also, as well, if you're wondering, of course, it is nearly Christmas. If you're sitting there thinking, who is Christmas number one? I'm a little bit old and a little bit uncool. I don't stop and think about who's Christmas number one these days. Do you?
No, not these. I did back in the day, in the 80s.
It was a big deal, wasn't it?
It was a huge thing, and everyone used to be vying for it. All the bands used to be vying for Christmas number one, but I couldn't tell you recent years. I've got no interest in it.
Well, I can tell you, the number one Christmas, number one 2023, it's Wham! And Last Christmas.
Ah, that's good.
Yes.
I remember that one.
You just said you didn't even know what that song was. This is Lord Moylan.
I mean, the tune is around everywhere, isn't it? And it is simply ghastly. I mean, it's one of the worst.
It's fabulous.
One of the worst pieces of popular music. When you could have had something nice like something from Bach's Christmas Oratorio, something like that, to cheer everybody up.
You're just anti-working class culture, Daniel, aren't you? Just be honest.
Come on. Gambas,
Look how posh he is. Look at how posh
he just doesn't like popular culture.
This rubbish. I mean, God no.
Well, this Last Christmas, Wham! It was 39 years ago. It was released apparently, and it kept getting beaten off the top spot by Band Aid. Was it Band Aid? When I said that, it doesn't sound right, but that was right.
No, well, the producer popped in during the break and said that was true, so we don't argue with the producer.
Don't ruin it. I was trying to make out to the British viewing public that I know all these facts off the top of my head.
The facade.
I have them underneath my Christmas hat. Anyway, look, let's bring your Christmas trees in, shall we? I do like it. You've been sharing them as we go along. Let's have a look. First one. Here we go. Who's this one? Paul. Let's have a look at Paul's Christmas tree, shall we? Oh, look. Never mind the Christmas tree. Look at that young lady on the screen there.
Where are we?
Yeah, where are you two? It's deliberately timed it so you two want in. Yeah, it's cut you out. That's a nice Christmas tree. We like that one. I like your windows as well. What's that called on the windows? What's it called?
Pass.
Oh, anyway, it looks nice. Lisa and Paul, this is theirs. I like it. Nice. I like your star at the top. Let's have a look at the Finnegan families. Oh, yes, well, there we are again.
That's exactly the same shot as the last one.
Not in, yes.
Yeah, I haven't got
There's none of Paul and Daniel are not having any of it. They've been
have they put you above the fire to keep the kids away from the fire?
Yeah, to keep the burglars out. Yeah, they're trying to stop all the burglars robbing all those presents by sticking me there. Let's have a look, Linda's. Let's have a look at Linda's. That's nice. Oh, and
Yeah,
I also like the love
tasteful.
heart as well. I like that. Yeah, love heart. It's nice and classy. I like that one. Right, before I break for Christmas, I can't not ask you all, do you charge your family to come and join you for Christmas dinner, Paul?
Well, if I thought it would keep them away, I might do. But
Oh, no, you wouldn't.
no, I would never do that. My family are coming to me for Christmas Day, and I'm really looking forward to it. I would not dream of, no matter how poverty-stricken I might be, I wouldn't dream of charging people to come and eat my Christmas dinner with me. Would you?
Would I?
Do they do that in Hull?
Well, I'm quite tight, actually. So if I was having... My family are absolutely ginormous. There's loads of us. So I probably would charge a £5 entrance fee or something to come in.
I think it's a marvellous way of families chipping in together at a communal family event, and quite right too. And I'm going to recommend it to my sister and her family, the Bromfields of St Albans, that they should be doing it this year.
Tory Britain, that's Tory Britain. All we're interested in is making a fast buck, even out of Christmas. Let's make a fast buck out of Christmas.
I don't think this lady's making a profit.
Ron says, Michelle, my late wife and I brought up our only child, and I have two lovely grandsons. If my wife charged me for the once-in-a-year homemade Christmas dinner, I'd probably be changing my will, he says. I don't know, Ezra says, I think it's only fair that you pay your way when you're going around to a family members for Christmas dinner. It's once a year. It should be seen as a positive to chip in, not a negative. The reason that we're asking is because there's a grandma in Cardiff. She's charging her family for the 7th year in a row. She says that she charges the adult relatives £15 for the Christmas spread, and she's got an adult rate and a kids rate. I like this. She's put a lot of thought into this. She charges the grandchildren £2.50 each. That's not a lot of money, actually,
No, it's
is
not
it?
a lot, is it? No. No.
I mean, if you can't afford, no disrespect,
grandkids can eat a lot.
If you can't afford to host the event, then don't host the event. But to say to people, well, you can come for Christmas dinner, but I'm going to charge you, I just think
they've turned up every year for 7 years. They must like it.
They must be
A lot of people have got very hard times, actually, and they want the company, and they can't always afford the company. So I say, you know what, do whatever works for you. I do just want to take a second, actually, on that note, just to say thank you very much to each and every single one of you that's watched GB News this year, that's supported our channel, that's watched Dewbs & Co. I absolutely love sharing my evenings with all of you guys at home. Some of my panel are all right as well, not all of them. But we don't take you for granted. We very much appreciate it. You know that our channel, it still comes in for a bit of stick. And I know, I hear you. You ask about the adverts all the time. There's still this pressure campaign trying to shut us down. But, you know, we're here. We're not going anywhere. You're very important to us all. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Have a lovely time. Please don't spend it alone. And I can't wait to see you in 2024. Night-night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most places having another mild, cloudy and fairly windy day tomorrow. Particularly wet, though, across parts of Scotland, where there are warnings in place. A snow warning across Shetland already, but another snow and ice warning coming into play this evening over the northeast of Scotland. Some heavy snow here, making for some tricky driving conditions, particularly for tomorrow morning. Heavy rain then sets in across western Scotland. Elsewhere, it's just a generally cloudy night and a breezy night and a very mild night as well. But a wet start across Scotland tomorrow. Heavy rain in the west and some heavy snow for a time across the northeast, even down to lower levels for a time. So as I said, that could cause some issues. The rain lasts all day in the west. Could also cause some disruption. Patchy rain for southern and central Scotland, later for Northern Ireland and Northern England, but a good part of England and Wales just dry and cloudy. Some brightness in the east, could see temperatures into the teens. It is mild.
11 or 12 Celsius, even where it's grey. Quite blustery on Christmas Eve. Gusty winds over northeast England and later northern Scotland mean we have Met Office yellow warnings in place and a warning for the rain across parts of Wales. That'll probably sink south through the day. Some brighter spells, but for many, Christmas Eve weather doesn't look brilliant. Again, though, it will be mild, with temperatures getting into the teens across parts of the east of England, where we see any sunny spells. Christmas, then, looking fairly mild but damp. There will be some colder weather across Scotland, where a bit of snow is possible on the big day across the north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend.